Alright, you all asked for it, and it's taken me longer than I would have liked to get it out, but here it is. The video showing how I made my Sonic 3 Ivo Robotnik custom. So, those customs I made for Sonic 3 are pretty well received, and personally, I was more proud of this one than the other two. I'm really happy with how this guy came out. Alright, so you're going to get your Eggman figure, and the first thing you're going to want to do is disassemble it. So you're going to want to take a hairdryer and warm him up. And then you're going to want to pull his arms off and pop his legs out of socket. Okay, so I popped the arms and legs off. You want to be careful here. You can see there's a little bit of stress on that peg where his arms peg in. So make sure that you warm the figure up and you're gentle when you're taking the arms and legs off. I mean, you're going to have to use some force to get it apart, but don't do too much. The next step you're going to want to do is pop apart his torso here in the center where there's a break in the coat. So you're just going to grab and pull and twist if you need to, and hopefully it'll pop apart. Alright, just like that, he's apart. Another ball joint. So now we can pop this part out. Okay. So there's the lower part of the body. And that leaves us with this. So the only way to get this apart is to cut it. We're going to be reusing this piece later. So you want to be careful how you do this, and if you are younger, you need to have an adult do this for you because we are going to be using an X-Acto knife. And these are very sharp and very easy to cut yourself with. So you want to get this lined up right in the middle, and then you just cut right down as straight line as possible. So there's the top part, and now you do the same thing for the bottom. Be careful not to cut through both layers of the coat. There you go. Now you have this coat in two separate parts. So we'll set that aside for later. So this is what I used for my custom. It is super sculpty. I got this at Hobby Lobby, as you can see. And it's really kind of hard to knead at first, and the colder it gets, the more crumbly it gets. But you're just going to want to knead it until it's soft, and then you can sculpt on your details. A lot of customizers use epoxy sculpt. That actually air dries. You don't have to bake that. But I don't have any experience with it. I've never used it. I've always used clay. He already has a little bit of chest definition here. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and plop this on his pec area. Doesn't have to be super well formed, because he's a chubby guy. He's got man boobs, not a bunch of hard definition with regular muscles. So the blobbier it looks, the more accurate it looks. Alright, that works for me. So now we can move on. Oops, I bumped the camera. So now we can move on to the belly. So just knead your clay so that it's soft and moldable. Alright, now that we have our clay nice and soft, we'll just take our ball of clay and we'll mash it onto his belly here. I'm actually going to take the top of the torso off. Probably should have just left that off to begin with, but take the top of the torso off so I can focus on just the lower area, molding the belly. There's little divots where the jacket was sitting in place. We don't really need those anymore, so to give the clay a better anchor to the figure, you can go ahead and fill it into those holes. Okay, so here's the belly molded. I'm going to go ahead and cut around the leg joints because you can see it got down in there. So we're going to just go ahead and come around here. Make sure we're not going to inhibit any of our leg articulation. So yeah, there's the belly sculpted. He's got a little more of a figure to him now. He's a little more robust. If you want just for fun, you can pop a little belly button in there. There you go. You won't see that, but remember to keep it going down. So bellies, you know, they sag. Well, not all of them, but Eggman's belly kind of sags to give him that egg shape. So it's more in here, and then it gets a little larger as you go down, and then tapers back below him. So there we go. Alright, so this next step isn't necessarily make or break with this process, but I forgot, I took the body apart. So the reason I do this is because this head is a little more gummy, and when I bake it, I don't want the mustache to melt. So the way I did this, and I'm not going to guarantee you it's going to work for you because I'm not sure, this is a brittle plastic, so you don't really have to worry about it breaking in the oven, or melting in the oven, but you do have to worry about breaking it when you take it apart. So the pieces are together like this, and I kind of just pull back on Robotnik's head, and it pops the chest out like this, and then I can pull it off. So I actually had to remove this sculpt work to do that, and then I just reapplied it back on. But yeah, this just is going to help to ensure that you don't melt the head when you bake it. Okay, so the next step we're going to do is we're going to be adding a wash to all these parts. In the movie, he's dirty. The suit has been through an explosion from the end of Sonic 2. So it's not going to be this bright, clean red again. Again, we'll pull in the current custom. So the wash just makes it look a little more dingy. Makes his suit look a little more dirty and a little more burned. So there's multiple ways you can do this. A lot of people do washes by taking paint and watering it down and then applying it to the figure and letting it partially dry and then rubbing it off. You'd use black paint, or if you want, you could use like dark red for the coat and then brown for the face. That's not exactly how I do it. I take the easy way out, and I still think it works well. So the way I do it is I have these markers that I got from Walmart. It was a pack. I can't remember how many there were. There were several of them. Most of them look like this. I got them as an alternative to Gundam markers, just so I could use them on custom figures. They are King Art. I don't know much about this brand other than I just got this large pack of pens from Walmart. But the specific pen that I want to use is this one. It's just kind of like this big marker type brush tip. So I take this marker and you just go like this. All of the red and all of the zipper portions, all of the little details, you just cover with ink. Alright, now, before this sets, because it will stain if you leave it on too long. That's why I say go one piece at a time. Go ahead, I have a microfiber cloth here. You don't have to use microfiber cloth, you can use just a regular washcloth, or just any piece of cloth. But I have it damped here to kind of take the paint off, or take the ink off. And the microfiber helps to make sure that you're not going to scratch up your figure. But like I said, if you don't have one, it's not necessary for this process. I'm just going to go in and rub all the exterior parts of this coat that we just rubbed ink all over. So now I'll go in with the bottom part of the jacket. I would like to note, this should not be permanent ink like a Sharpie. Do not do this with Sharpie. You will destroy whatever you're working on. Sharpies are meant to be a permanent marker, and if you use them, you're just going to be painting everything black. And I even like, you can take your thumb to kind of help with the process and just rub the ink around before you take the wet cloth and wash it off. And that'll help it to set in better too. So there we have the first layer of wash on our coat. Properly looking a little more dingy, like it should. Now we'll wash the arms. There we go, side by side. You can tell it's a little bit darker, looks a little dirtier. Do this arm now. And alright, that does it for the coat. So now our coat and our arms here are nice and dingy looking. If you want them dingier, you can just keep doing the wash method over and over again. And again, you don't have to do this marker method with these King Arts. I mean, I don't even know any other brands, but like I said, these are just markers I picked up at Walmart. I'm not sure what alternatives would be. Like, I do a lot of art projects. I don't know a lot about art utensils. I kind of always just I have kind of just always used what's at my disposal. So there's that. Now, reminder, we do have these joints as well. So don't forget to do these. You can either do them now when it's separated, or you can do it after you get the figure all together. And there we go. Now, all the red parts that will be seen have some sort of paint wash on them. Next thing is the head. Now before we do this, I do want to bring in this figure. And as you can see on his chin, the mold itself had imperfections in it, and the wash picked it up. So if you don't like that, you don't necessarily have to do the head, but I mean, in the movie he does look dirty, and his eyes, it really helps bring out his eyes, because he has dark circles under his eyes in the movies. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that if there are imperfections in your figure, it will show through after you put this wash on. But in my opinion, it still is worth it, because there is not a lot of paint detail on this head, aside from the mustache, the glasses, and the eyes. He's just got a bald head, so a lot of detail gets lost, and this wash helps with that. Now our little Jim Carrey head is just ever so slightly more of a definition. So now the next step will be to get the figure partially reassembled after baking, and we can start adding the cloth goods. So our next step is going to be to put Robotnik back apart. So when you're doing this, you've got your back here, and when you put the shoulders in, this is the direction they're supposed to be facing. So you have this line here. You can kind of see where it's supposed to line up, and you'll just put it back inside the socket here, where it can pivot at the butterfly joint. We'll do that here. Then here's Robotnik's neck. There's this little brown piece that can come off, but it needs to go in the back part of the torso here. Then here's his chest. So once we have this all set up and ready to go, what we can do is take, and you don't want to use a lot of this because you don't want to glue the joints together. We have some glue here, some super glue. And this isn't even necessary, but since after you broke this seal, it's a good chance that it could fall apart again. So in each of these little holes, you're going to want to put just the slightest little dab of glue. I don't know how well you can see it, but I'm not using much glue at all. So I have a little bit of glue in each hole down here, and then right on the edge of the shoulder pieces. These holes here in the middle are all for the joints, so you're not going to want to do that. You can put some glue here right in the very middle. That's where the main part of the body pegs together. So that'll help seal that. Now that we have a little bit of glue to tack this on, we want to carefully place it together. and press all those pieces into one another. So now we have Robotnik. We have his upper portion back together. Ensure that the butterfly joints still move, shoulders still move. I, off camera, did have to trim away some of the chest sculpt just because it was getting in the way of the butterfly joints. So there's a seam there. We're going to try to hold this together for a minute so it can tack together. Alright, now that he's all tacked and glued together, we have his torso. I also did some trimming on this as well, just to try to make more room for the legs. Doesn't look too great, but it's all going to be painted black anyway. Now we'll pop the body back together. Alright, I've got them back together now. It does take quite a bit of force, and I did trim around the outside area because I think it might have warped a little bit during baking. You can see where I did stretch the plastic a little bit trying to get them back together, so just make sure you don't break that ball joint off of its peg. But now we have a torso for Jim Carrey. The next step is going to be to paint this bottom part black to match the rest of his pants. So we'll do that real quick. I have a little piece of paper here so that I don't get the rest of my workspace covered in paint. Let's get a little bit of paint here. Get a brush. Move this. Get our paint on our brush, and we'll just paint the bottom part of his torso black. Alright, now that I have him painted, we're going to let this dry, and afterwards would be a good time to spray this with some sort of clear coat if you'd like to keep your paint from chipping. But just make sure to get all the little spaces you might have nicked while working on it, and all the little grooves you could have created. While we're at it, right now the bottom half is dried here. So now I'm going to go ahead and paint his chest peach. So I just have some peach paint. Here's what I've been using. I just use these apple barrel acrylics. There's better paints you can buy, but this stuff's cheap. I think it's like almost 50 cents. So the chest is going to take a couple more coats because it's light going onto a darker red color. So it's not going to cover very well. But you just basically want to color the entire front of his chest. Alright, so I think total I've done 7 or 8 coats now to get this much coverage. That's all I'm going to do. You can do more, you can do less, it's up to you, but it does take quite a bit of paint to cover this red plastic. Once you get there though, this is what you got. So the next step will be making the shirt. So when it comes to making the shirt for Robotnik, what you do is you have a piece of black cloth. What I'm using is a piece of a pillowcase. The reason I'm using a pillowcase is because it has this end here, the seam from the outer part where you put the pillows in, where it's hemmed. I use this because it kind of gives the illusion of a shirt, like a button-up shirt. But you don't have to necessarily use that. I think it just adds to the figure if you don't have a piece, specifically a black pillowcase like most people won't have. You can just use a piece of black cloth and it'll work well enough. You can always hem yourself, so you can take the end of it and fold it over like this and then just fill it with hot glue or super glue or even just sew it. I'm just using this to make it easier on myself. What you do is you size it up so you wrap it around the lower part of his body. You want to make sure it will touch with enough overlap where the belly is. Then you find where the armholes are going to fit comfortably with this ending right here at the top of his pants, and you cut the armholes in. Very rough, doesn't have to look perfect. It's all going to be covered up anyway except the front. So just go ahead and put this on him like a little vest. I'm sure there's probably better ways to do that, but this is just how I do it. So once you have the vest on him like this, you're going to pull this piece over to the middle of the body. Then you're going to pull the other end over like this. Make sure it fits with overlap and the seam is right in the middle of his torso. And you're just going to want to put a little dab of glue right here on his belly over the first piece of material. Let it soak through onto the body. And then you might want to wear gloves for this. I would recommend wearing gloves. I'm not wearing gloves, but you should probably wear gloves. And then just fold your material over like that. And that'll be the start of the shirt. So you're going to do the same thing here in the middle of the chest, right where the chest meets, right here. So pull this over, put a dab of glue right here, and then pull your second piece over top and hold it like that. You can see I got it on a little crooked. This piece over here is higher than this piece. But now he has somewhat of a shirt. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this top part and pinch it together like this. And if you were doing a figure where you're showing the back of it, you're not going to want to do it like this. But since we're just going to have that rubber coat over this anyway, we're going to use 2 pieces of glue, or 2 drops of glue. One here in the middle to hold the back together, like that. Getting my fingers stuck together. And then one here on the right shoulder blade. Or left, just one of the shoulder blades. You can then fold this down. Want this all to be tight together. Then you can fold it over. And that'll draw the shirt together a little bit. So this is still kind of rough looking. Let that dry and then we'll move on. Alright, now that it's dry, here's what it looks like from the back. You can tell that we can still move them around because this is all cloth. So we don't lose that articulation. So now, to try to make the neck look a little bit better, what we're going to do, and to make it look more like a shirt, we have these 2 flaps below. So what we'll do is we'll take a little drop of glue like this, hold this one over, put a drop of glue on this side of the shirt, like so. Now I got a tool that I can use to get in here and fold this over like this. Just hold it down while it dries. So now that that's done, that makes one of our little lapels, one of our pieces of the collar. Right there. So now we'll do the same thing with this side. So use our tool to kind of get it pulled over somehow, like how it'll match. So right there looks pretty decent. And then we have our glue on. Just hold it down. Alright, and after that all dries, we have something that roughly looks like a shirt. When you're making your lapels, you might also want to roll the fabric all the way back, just like a real collar, so that it doesn't look weird. See, it kind of looks weird over here, but my fabric got all cut up. So I'm just going to keep adjusting and gluing pieces of fabric until I get a look that I want. Okay, so now that the shirt is in place, we're going to do a little more painting. So what I have right here is metallic silver puff paint. So I'm just going to put a little bit of paint down on my little area, my little paint pad over here. And now that we have a seam here, we're going to just go ahead, take a sharp tool. So I've got a little metal sculpting tool. Maybe be able to use a toothpick. But I'm just going to go here, dot on there, dot on the shirt. And now that gives us the illusion of our little buttons. And since it's puff paint, it's even 3D. So now we have our buttons. You can put one on the lapel if you want. You don't have to. Alright, so the next thing we're going to want to do to this torso is we're going to want to make the little scarf that he wraps around his belt area. What I'm going to use for that is this piece of a lanyard that I cut down to size. It's got a little rough edge there. That's fine. It's going to be wrapped around the figure anyway. You can do this with any piece of red cloth you have. You just want to get a strip of red like this that'll wrap around the figure around 2 times. So there's one wrap and then about another half. So, and you can work on how you position it. So you can have it to where the 2 pieces end in the back like that. We also might take this shirt and cut it a little bit so that it's closer to the belt line that we drew. Or we can also just push it up like that if you don't mind it being wrinkled. What we're going to do with the scarf is we have red. And we're just going to draw diagonal black lines on the scarf in order to mimic the pattern for the scarf in the movie. Just try to kind of keep them evenly spaced apart as you go down. You can alternate. You can make some of the lines thicker, some of the lines thinner. Just whatever works for your taste. Whatever you think looks best to mimic that look from the movie. Once you have your scarf made, go ahead and depending on the length, you'll want to dry fit it. Because of the length of mine, I'm going to start the wrap here at his side. So, we'll take our super glue, dab here on the side of the figure. We'll hold that down at the base of the shirt so that it sticks. And then we'll just wrap it around a couple times like that. Get a slight overlap. Come to the back here. Put another dab of super glue. Be careful not to get it on your fingers. Again, you might want to wear gloves for this. And hold that piece down. You can use hot glue as well. Just got to be something that will stick the fabric to itself. And like that, you get to mimic the look of the scarf going around his body at the base of a shirt. And once you're done, put this glue up. You can always go back in with your marker, and if you want to kind of add a little more black, a couple more lines and whatnot, you can. You can also just dirty it up, you know. If you want to take the marker that we used for the wash, you can kind of just dab some dirt look on there. Make it look like he's been wearing it in the sewer and whatnot, like they do in the movie. See, in the sewer and everything else. In the old base. So yeah, so that's how you can mimic the scarf. Obviously, the more time you take, the better it's going to look. That will complete our torso. So if you want, we can go ahead and pop the legs back on. But that's that. So with that out of the way, the next thing we want to do is start working on the coat and adding the battle damage to it. He also has little pieces of scrap material and whatnot. So the first thing you want to do with this coat is there's this little collar from when the coat was zipped up on the figure. You want to cut that collar away by following the line here. Remember, the rule with knives is always cut away from yourself. Okay, now that you cut that off, there's going to be a bunch of fresh red color. And you can either cover that with black paint, or you can just take the marker we used before and go over it. You could also do this with a Sharpie, but Sharpies tend to rub and bleed and dye parts of your figure that you might not want to be recolored. Apply a coat heavy like this, and then let it dry. Now the next step you want to do for the coat is, with the body being bigger than it used to be, it's harder for the coat to fit around. So on the front part of this coat, we're going to add some glue. And make sure you add the glue above the black line, because the black line is still going to be visible. And now, just line up the red line. I got a little too much glue, give me a sec. Just line up this red line on the bottom of the coat with that black line. Make sure you're keeping your zippers together and hold that in place. And then the same over here. Hold that in place. If by the way you glue it, there's a little bit of excess poking out there, you can always take your knife, go along the base of that jacket zipper, and trim it down. And always be careful with knives and glue. Don't cut yourself, don't glue your fingers together. Be cautious. More cautious than I am. I leave the back open just so, for mobility's sake. So in the movie you can see there are some spots where the coat was burned and torn up. And one of those spots is down here. So I remember that spot specifically. So we can go ahead and just cut the corner off the bottom part of this jacket. Like so. There's a piece of damaged clothing, and there was also a spot on the back here that was noticeable, where there was a gouge taken out of the jacket, kind of up here. So if you split it in half here, it's kind of in the middle of this piece. So we'll just take our knife or scissors or whatever you have and carefully cut a gouge out of the jacket. There you go. And you can make it look burned or blackened with the marker again once you get it cut. There's that. There's that. So our jacket's looking a little more roughed up. We will start gluing fabric to this jacket. So you can use whatever fabric you find laying around, and just to show you how easy and versatile this process is, it's literally just scraps to make it look like the jacket's worn out. So here's an old alcohol wipe that is dried out, and he's got these threads that hang out. So here's the old figure, and I'll put a picture up on the screen. He has these threads that hang out where the jacket's been torn and ripped up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take straps. I'm just going to take this, rip little strips of it like that. And once it's ripped, you can wrap it between your fingers to turn it into a string, or to at least mimic a string. Then you can take this string, put a little glue where we cut that piece away, and glue this piece like that. And with an old alcohol wipe, we now have a string hanging from Robotnik. So here's another little string, and another daub of glue. You can bend the string to give the illusion of there being more with each piece. Now we'll do the same effect here in the front. So now you have that. Then once you have it glued on, you can take your scissors like this, and you can just cut into it, rough it up a bit, make it look like strands of fabric are just fraying out of there. This is a versatile process. Very versatile process. It's just scraps, you know, there's nothing specific about it. Here is the other figure. I didn't use a alcohol wipe for this one. I had an old piece of like string from a tag from a shirt I bought that I frayed out and glued on there. And there's the back. You know, looks similar, completely different materials. So don't be afraid to be experimental. We're gonna make these patches next, and that's gonna be easy. So you just want to get your red fabric like this, and the patches in the movie look like a old flannel shirt or something. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our black marker again, and we're going to size it up so the patch probably look about like that on the figure. So that looks like it's going to work. So we'll take our fabric like this, and we're just going to draw on it. Make this look like a flannel shirt. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a grid like that. We're going to color in every other square like a checkerboard. Or you could even use an old flannel shirt if you have one with small enough squares. You probably don't have one with small enough squares, but maybe if you had an old piece of fabric that resembled it, you know, that could work too. So now we have that little piece that resembles a flannel shirt. A pair of scissors, cut it to size, and we'll add a little piece of frayed white up here at the top of where the piece would be. So I'm just eyeballing this after looking at reference images of the movie. Now we'll take our glue between these two pieces of white fabric. We'll take our piece that resembles a flannel shirt, like that. We'll just glue it in place, like that. Now that that's glued on there, we can go ahead and trim the edges up a little bit. I'll cut into this piece to make it look frayed. Just like that, we have a piece of flannel that has been used to repair a hole in Robotnik's jacket. It's just that simple, guys. So there's these all over the arms. There's a piece here on the front, piece here on the collar. They're all over this arm with the white and the flannel looking pieces. So that's the process you do to make pieces like that. Very simple. Now the next type of thing we're going to be looking for are the pieces of the flowered quilt. They use like a flowered quilt to repair the suit as well. There's one on the back. And I will show you how we go about doing that. Also very simple. So we'll start out with this one here, this green looking one. So we see we got 3 layers, green, red, and yellow. And then the flower has the petals on there. And the way we do that, so we have some green fabric here. I bought this at Walmart for, I think, less than $5 for this big piece of green fabric. Way bigger than what we need for the figure. So I have a smaller square to work with here of fabric. And now what we're going to do is get the outline of that where it looks size-wise. Again, none of this is even specific. It's just looking at reference photos and trying to get the right size by looking at it. So it's about the size of the lid to our cap. I also here have a piece under the flower, have a piece of green tape that I drew some lines on with a marker just to fill out that area to resemble different types of fabric and whatnot that he's used. I don't have any more of that green tape, but you can get experimental with it. So here's a piece of blue painter's tape. We'll take our scissors with this painter's tape. We'll cut a little rectangle there. And to make sure it stays on, here is a small dab of glue. And just right along the line there, we will put our blue piece of painter's tape. And then if you want it to look closer to the movie, you can take a yellow marker over the blue painter's tape, and it'll make it look more green. I don't have a yellow marker at the moment, but that is how you will do it. And you can outline it so that it resembles the piece of whatever this is in the movie. And add the diagonal lines. Just like that, we have another spare piece of fabric that was added to the suit. So now for the flower, which I said we were going to do a while ago, and I got sidetracked because I realized that I needed to show how to make that piece. So, again, we'll take our marker. Got a basic look for that flower was the size of the pen cap. So here's our little circle. All right. Now we'll cut that little circle out. I will fold the fabric and cut the little half circle to make it easier. So here's the first part. That looks a little big, so I'm going to take a little more off. We'll see. Sometimes you can be more precise with the scissors the closer to the inside you get. So farther down here, it's a little easier to cut corners and edges. So there's that. It's looking like a good first layer. So on top of that piece, we have another little piece of red fabric. So here's our little piece of lanyard again. I'm not even going to measure this one out. I'll just go ahead and cut a square here. I'll attempt to cut that square into somewhat of a circle. And we want to make sure this circle is smaller than the green circle. And it is. I might take a little bit more off. So now we have our green circle of fabric. Put a dab of glue. And we'll glue on our red circle of fabric. Come on. So now we have a layered effect. And on the red part is where we see the petals for the flower. So I'm going to replicate petals by just putting lines on the red fabric. So now that we have the red lines crossing around on the fabric, that kind of resembles flower petals. And for the last little piece, have a little piece of yellow fabric. So I cut a smaller section here of the yellow fabric, and I'll come here to one of the corners and just cut off a small little circular shape like that. And I will put a small dab of glue in the middle of our little red part, our flower, like that. And now I'll take this tool here, put the yellow piece of fabric on there. And we will add it to the center of the red piece of fabric where our glue is. Just like that, we've used scraps of fabric to replicate one of the little quilted flowers for Eggman's suit. And it goes about right here, like so. So we will add some glue here below the blue line we added earlier, and we'll glue that flower right on. With all these different materials, we have all these different aspects of the coat. I go ahead, just do a little trimming once it's on. Clear up some free space. Cut this down a little bit. So there you go. We're just going to keep repeating processes like this. So he has a little piece of white up here. So we'll take a little piece of white here. Get that real thin. Add a little glue here. There you go, now he has a piece of white fabric dangling. So there you go. We're just going to repeat this process for all of the little patches and such that you see. Alright guys, I've gone off camera here and I've made all these pieces of fabric for the figure. Here is the first one. It is a yellow fabric paint glued on to the top of a piece of green fabric, both cut into kind of a half circle shape. And then I used a red Sharpie to color on that little piece there. And I used one of my more fine tip markers to draw the design on afterwards. So I just drew the half circle and drew the flower petals, and that's all for this piece. Here's another little flower that's going to go on his back. That is a piece of red fabric that's been cut to a circle that I also kind of dinged up with a black Sharpie, or not a black Sharpie, but just a black marker. And I cut a piece of green on top of it, and then a piece of yellow fabric for on top of that, and that makes it a little kind of flower looking thing. And then we just have all these pieces of the red fabric that I colored to look like flannel, and I have cut up into little shapes, little triangles and squares and whatnot. I'm gonna use them to best fit each part of his body that I saw scraps on the movie pics. And I'm going to be using my figure over here as a reference as I glue them on. But if you're doing this, you can either watch my video of where I glue them on, or just pull up screenshots from the movie and just glue as you go. Here's more little pieces of thread, little white thread that I made from, again, I just took a piece of cleaning wipe, like an alcohol wipe, after it dried out, and I pulled it together, pulled it apart, and then rolled it together to make little strips of cloth. Again, you can use whatever you need. You can use white thread or whatever you have. I'm just trying to use random scraps in this video, again, to make this process as easy as possible for you guys. Oh, and here's another piece of blue tape that I'm going to glue on the back, and then we'll draw the design on it. So now I'm just going to glue these pieces together and speed it up. Okay guys, we'll slow down for a second here to this piece, because I'm going to draw the design on. And I did this piece bigger. A lot of these pieces I've done bigger, just to kind of exaggerate them on this new figure to make them look more, make them easier to see. But I also think it might look better as an end result, just because it's going to look more pieced and put together. But I've got this piece on here, and I'm going to reference my figure over here because I already did this once before. And we're just going to draw the design we see. So I've got my golden, bronze, and silver Sharpies. And you don't even have to use these colors. The picture I used looked kind of like he had whites and yellows and whatnot. And it was just kind of dark. But I'm not that worried about it. Do whatever you need to satisfy your customization. But I've got my gold here, and I'm just going to try to mimic the pattern I see over there. Looks like we have kind of just little designs drawn on. Probably one of those. And we'll come in with the silver, add a little more detail. And there we go. That's probably all I'm really going to do. I just drew little zigzags and lines and whatnot to kind of give it like a material looking pattern with gold and silver Sharpie. You don't even have to use a Sharpie. You can just use paint, whatever you feel like you need to. Get creative with it. And now back to gluing. Starting with this flower we made. Okay, now our Eggman figure here is all covered in scraps of fabric. So, including his arms. Go ahead and pop those back on. Now, in retrospect, putting these arms on before doing all of the gluing might have been a better idea. It didn't necessarily give me any problems, but I just thought of that. Maybe it's something that could give somebody else problems along down the road. So you might want to put the arms on first before gluing on all the fabric. But he is starting to resemble this guy over here, isn't he? Looks like I might need a couple more pieces. I definitely need to add this piece here. So that's all the pieces of fabric I'm going to add for now. Now that the movie's out on physical, I might go buy it and then pause it and actually look to see if I missed any pieces. Because I'm sure like there's a lot going on at the back that I missed probably because I couldn't get any good shots of it during the movie. But for the most part, here's the premise on how to do this. So you can add as many little patches as you want. Now that he's all covered, we're going to move on to these burns here. And the way I'm going to do it on this video is different than how I did it on this figure. This figure I actually heated up metal and I just burned the figure. But I'm not going to do that on camera. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of gouge out pieces of the costume with the little blade. We'll just add little holes and whatnot. Alright, now that I have this figure all scarred up, what we're going to do is we're going to give it another wash. And again, I'm going to be using the pen that I used last time. We're just going to go start marking up all these areas that we gouged and made look rough. Now I've got my damp towel, and I'm just going to rub them around on the figure where all that wash was put. That, he's really kind of starting to come together. We just have a couple of things left to do. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to color the tips of his gloves like this one. He has the little gadgets on there that he uses to control the robots. So his pinky, his index, his thumb, and his little joystick there can be painted silver. And then on this hand, you can do the same. This hand I used paint. This hand over here, I'm going to use a marker. just to see how it looks different. I would recommend going with paint if you have it, because sometimes these markers go on and they look good, but they lose their luster over time. Okay, now his hands are done and they have little silver accents to give them a little more depth. Last two things I'm going to do is paint. I'm going to paint here on his leg where his pants were ripped. And I'm going to paint his goggles green. Alright guys, and with that we have recreated this figure over here. So some aspects I like about the new one more, some aspects I like about the old one more. But either way, you guys now know how to make your own battle-damaged Eggman figure from Sonic the Hedgehog 3. So, last-minute tips. If you want, you could probably cover this guy in clear coat, but I will warn you, if you do that, it'll probably end up destroying the soft goods, or at least messing with their functionality. So I'd be careful about that. Do it at your own risk. I'm not going to, because this is just going to display. I'm not really going to do much with this figure. But yeah, I'll post up some pictures, some I guess glamour shots, as you could say, for the end of the video. And I hope you enjoyed watching this video. It's taken me forever to get done, but it's finally over. It's finally completed. And now you guys know how you can make your own custom Sonic the Hedgehog 3 Battle Damaged Eggman. So with this, have a great day, God bless, and I will see you all next time.